well. And today's topic is on from the textbook of English in Use, the abilities of individuals. This is course 8 in our program. This textbook is dealing with the language learning of the individuals and language as a communication system. It divided into two important concepts. One is written communication and other one is spoken communication. Today, we are going to look at the very beginning and the foundations of a communication system in human language, as well as a student or a learner perspective. First one, when we look at the essential social context of human communication, if you look at this one, the unit 1 on page number 1, unit 1 in course 8, if you look at the essential social context of human communication, this unit is discussing about language as a communication system and the social transformation of individual behavior, and it is looking at cultural aspect also, cultural aspect of learning, and another important thing of a sign system, sign as one of the communication system. It looks at, and at the same time, what are the things that are involved in growing a child in a particular circumstances, whether it is a geographical or cultural location. So these kind of aspects and this unit is looking about. And for examination point of view, as well as in a general reading of the textbook and course instruction, this unit is very important because it is a foundation unit that is discussing about language as a communication system and what are the things involved in it and what are the aspects that play a key role in learning a language, and when this language become one of the key tool of communication and as well as an identity of an individual. These things are discussing in this unit. And if you look at on the page number 11, we have 6 sample questions. 6 sample questions. In this sample questions, so you can look at them like the importance of human interaction and communication for the growing child. It's a children perspective, child perspective. This question is looking at. And another one is, what are the main functions of the process of socialization? This is very, very important in learning communication skills. And explain the essential difference between the animal and human communication. And this one also very, very important. For examination point of view, there will be a question, and please focus on this idea, the difference between human and animal communication. And state and explain the existence of wide differences in the cultures of different societies. The cultures of different societies. Yeah, this is a general question. We'll look at this idea and explain how science can help people to communicate. And this is also one of the important topic in this unit. Discuss how the social setting influences meaning when language is used for communication. We'll club together and divide them into 3 main topics in this unit. First, we'll look at from the page number 1, what it is discussing about. This seems to be, especially in this textbook, you may be feel a bit bored because of frequently there's a couple of words appear in every unit. That is the communication, language learner, science system, culture, socialization. The same things may, it seems to be, it repeats the same, but actually they are not. They are discussing in a particular context. That context we should understand. We should understand. Uh, we should understand in a general perspective as well as in an examination point of view. Now look at the idea that language is a means of communication is an integral part of our understanding of the nature of language. Our actual experience of communication and interaction is based on particular languages. There is a saying, in English like that, the world limit is your language limit. The world limit is your language limit. If you know the languages, your world will be expanded. So without knowing the language, you cannot explore the other cultures and other places and other geographical locations also. So that is what it involved. The language plays a key role in human communication. And in a multilingual country like India, we are constantly encountering a number of languages which are different in very obvious ways. And at the same time, the language skills, especially the term communication skills, is of course widely used, but it is often linked to proficiency in a particular language. The communication skills, generally, we apply this one, the term communication skills for the English language. But this is not only the English language. The communication skills English language, because of its usage, only we are restricting or attributing the communication skills only to. Yeah, actually, this is this can be applicable to each and every language. That means that when we are learning a language, the language is depending on the proficiency level, level 1, level 2, level 3, such kind of levels. This chapter is introducing the related concepts. And another important thing here is that skills and abilities are a psychological phenomena that relate to individuals. Skills and abilities, and at the same time the development of abilities involves process in the mind and body of individuals, and we often find individual differences in rates of progress and eventual skill levels attained. This course is talking and discussing and as well as introducing the concepts related to the language proficiency, as well as the levels of proficiency, and at the same time the four important skills that are involved with the language LSRW skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But particularly our textbook is focusing on writing and the speaking skills from the learner's perspective, not the teacher's perspective. This entire textbook is a discussing about and through a learner's perspective, how a learner is learning his language and what are the things involved and what are the situations and circumstances influenced his language level and his, what is this, his cognitive skills. Such things, this unit, this chapter, this block, or the first four units discussing about these aspects around the learner. And another important thing we should look at here Yeah. As I have spoken, the communication between the animal and in human society, the difference between the communication system and the animal world as well as the human world. So, what kind of differences are there? Man is always described as a social animal. Individuals are always a part of some community. The important aspect of this social existence is not the fact of people generally live in groups in relatively close physical proximity, but in the centrality of interaction and communication in our everyday living. It is interesting to note that many species of animals live in groups. This is part of their nature. We recognize this and have coined terms to refer to the groups in which animals live. A common unit found in vocabulary teaching at the school level is that the list of specific means for these animal groups. So we learn to say a herd of cattle, a flock of birds, a pack of wolves, a school of fish, and so on. This shows clearly that living in groups is not anything specific to the human species. That means that we are living in a community. We are living in the groups, same as the animals are living. So the examples here are mentioning that. So the example here is like the head of cattle, a flock of birds, a pack of wolves. So this shows that means there is a group. There is a group of homogeneity of the same group. They are belonging to a particular community or particular geographical background. Same thing will happen in the humans also. And animals, some species certainly have a elaborate systems of communicating with one another. In recently, researchers have found that honeybees use movements of their bodies and wings to convey information. When we take honeybees as an example, bees returning from places at some distance from the hive are able to tell other bees where to go to find followers by indicating directions and distance. This is their mode of communication. Another familiar example is that ant species. For example, ants. Ants, as we know, are prodigious workers, building nests and carrying food particles over long distances in a coordinated manner. Clearly, their well-organized activity and efficiency are based on some system for the communication of relevant information. We must recognize that animals have highly developed and, in a sense, sophisticated means of communication. There are crucial differences between what bees or ants communicate and what human communication covers. The most important difference stems from the property of mind and individual consciousness of human beings, which is absent in all other forms of life. The using or the usage of a brain is only the human activity comparing to the other animals and other species. We are all individuals with consciousness and a sense of the self, and we relate to others whom we recognize as also having a sense of the self. Human communication is effectively between minds, but same as these things are not there with the animals. Our minds contain thoughts, memories, hopes, feelings, intentions, speculations, and so on. These often relate to the past and to the possible imagined future and to physically distant contexts, not things we see or directly experience in the immediately present environment. Here, one more thing is that the meaning and understanding are the central to this process. When people are using their mind, especially when it comes to the humans, the meaning and understanding If there is a meaning, but the people cannot understand, so there is no use of this communication system. So that is why this is a specialty of the human beings to understand and convey the meanings. And another important factor relating to the animal communication and human communication, how we communicate lies in the nature of the patterns of behavior of animals as compared with the typical human behavior as we go about our daily lives. The extent to which biological programming of behavior is transmitted from generation to generation through the genes is where a crucial difference exists. These things we are going to look at now. And when it comes to the language learning, we should remember one thing, that it is based on the behavior, individual behavior. If you look at on the paragraph of 1.3, there it discusses about human beings are totally different. A human infant comes into the world with a tremendous potential for learning, but with virtually in no inborn or instinctive patterns of behavior. The man or the child is a potential learner from the sucking the mother's breast or an artificial nipple for milk or food, grasping any object that comes into the hand or reflexes of parts of the body. For example, whether it is a mother's breastfeeding or else is it a milk bottle. He doesn't, he cannot identify that, but he is a very curious person. He can take that into his hand and he drinks the milk. They are not organized patterns of behavior of the whole body. Crawling and walking are matters of exploration, not functional activities like nest making or pecking at insects by animals. Since nothing exists that is instinctive, all the patterned behaviors or activities of the human individual have to be learned. When it comes to the human behavior, when it comes to the human behavior, it includes a wide range of organized and skilled activities, ranging from throwing balls, singing songs, to flying aeroplanes and designing building skyscrapers. Whatnot, there is an end number of activities the man or woman or the human species can do. Each one of these varied activities has to be learned. No one of them is determined by the unfolding of the instinctive and universal patterns because they differ from individual to individual. Yes, when the child, if you look at when the child is drinking the milk, whether it's from the mother's breast or it is from a milk bottle, it is a natural instinct. It's a natural pattern of the human behavior. This is no need to teach to someone else, but when these people are coming to fly a aeroplane, to construct a building, or to playing a game, or else singing a song, these are the acquired skills. If a man has an interest, he will learn it. Otherwise, he cannot. That man can be diversified himself into other activity. Same as it can also uh, it can also applicable to the language learning. Yeah. Another thing, the potential to learn virtually anything is present. Here, anything is present. The genes we inherit impose only very broad limits of patterns of behaviors we might develop. The human child can learn virtually anything, but everything must be learned. It's not a natural process. The, the environment of the human child or adult is essentially social and cultural in nature, not in physical. This is very important and the gist or the main idea of this unit. The environment of the human child is essentially social and cultural in nature, not physical. Everything has to be learned in a social cultural environment, which means essentially by interacting and communicating with other persons. Our development into normal human beings is based crucially on communication. Communication and the social cultural nature of man are closely intertwined. One has no meaning without the other. So the culture and the communication are interlinked. And when it comes to the child, we have been discussing the human child. Here, the human child, how he grew up in a society.
చెప్పండి ఏం కాదు తీసుకురండి ఏ క్లాస్ తీసుకురండి ఆధార్ కార్డు జిరాక్స్ టీసీ ఉందా తీసుకోండి బాబుని కూడా తీసుకురండి
हेलो सुनीता माइक ऑपे से स्पीकर ऑपे से
సారీ సార్
Yeah. Here, another important concept from this unit is that socialization. Socialization. So what is socialization? The process of learning to be a member of a given society is called socialization. This is the technical definition from a communication point of view or a language learning point of view. But at the same time, the socialization has a different definition in sociology and in political science. But in our context is a language learning. In this context, the definition is like this: the process of learning to be a member of a given society is called socialization. The process of socialization is not only a matter of providing the opportunities to learn these various things, it also means sharing certain attitudes and values of behaving in certain proper ways. The proper ways are very important. These proper ways are the methods or ideas or practicing systems, as well as accepted things. The emphasis in this term is to learning conventions and norms, the things one is expected to or allowed to say, expected to or allowed to say and do in different social settings. We belongs to different geographical, cultural, social, and linguistic areas. So in these areas, our language systems most of the time, it depends on our social settings. These are always a restricted subset of the many things a person can do in terms of a sheer ability. That means is individuality. A person who does not generally follow these norms is seen as a social misfit. If a person doesn't perform well doesn't perform well. This performance is not decided by the society. This performance levels are decided by the individuals, the individual learning capacities. When the person is not able to perform his duties or his expressions well, so people or society will consider him as a social misfit person. This demand to be like others, which comes from one's community, is a central principle of all social life. For example, we look at the ability is a different and personality is a different, the physical appearance is different. If you look at, for example, people who are physically handicapped, unable to use limbs or eyes or ears in the normal way, are seen as different. But this difference relating to lack of ability is accepted as unavoidable and generally treated with understanding and sympathy. So this is what the existing standard phenomena in the society. But here, what kind of ability you are looking at them is matter here. Whether you're looking at him to accessing something, or else you're looking at him in identifying or testing his ability, or else you are giving a prejudiced opinion towards them. And another thing, a person who does not behave in generally accepted ways. For example, the types of clothes they wear, manner of eating and drinking in public, shouting or making threatening gestures, not showing respect to certain categories of persons, is usually seen as an undesirable person or unaccepted manner. So that means here it is showing that being a member of a human community involves facing a wide range of demands and pressures. Individuals can choose to resist or rebel when it comes to the resistance or the rebel attitude. But in a general way, in a general way, the people perceive the other person yes. And yeah, and individuals can choose to resist or rebel. All social reformers, as we know, have had to fight against ideas and practices that were seen as normal and good by people around them. Actually, in this context, this is not required, but to understand in a larger context of the communication system of human language learning, as well as in speaking. So these things are very, very important. What are the accepted manner or unaccepted manner, and how we look at things and perceive the meanings out of it. And as we have discussed, where the man is a social animal, we are living in the society, we are living in a group, and at the same time, we are assigned with some roles. We are assigned with roles. In the socialization process, observing others and imitating them is the main way of learning conventions. Observing others and imitating them is the main way of learning conventions. Some people in the family and in the community are more important and powerful than others. Certain people do certain things which others are not supposed to do. Talking loudly and laughing are not allowed in certain places and on certain occasions. Wearing clean, nice clothes is expected on certain occasions. Certain objects, events generally make people happy. Certain actions win approval and admiration, while other actions are treated with disapproval or strong rejection and punishment. Along with this comes the idea of roles. So this is the society. The society accept these things, these kind of conventions and traditions are existing around us. So we have to behave and communicate according to these norms and conventions. If we go against with them, we'll consider as a rebel and we are very dangerous threat to the society or avoidable people. When we go against these kind of things which the society is decided, and at the same time these wearing clothes, doing some specific occupations and maintaining some social decorum, manners, all these things come up with a particular idea called roles. Roles means they are assigned to do particular job or particular performances. Here the particular responsibilities assigned to different categories of persons. Women from one category, women from one category uh, among these, the roles assigned to them involve many demands on what they do, how they behave, and even how they talk to others. These are the very, very important matters in the context of the women. Elders in the family and in the community are another category. How to talk to elders, how to talk to your parents, how to talk to your grandparents. This is also conveys a learning system of communication. People's vocations and social status are also related to roles and ways of behaving. This applies to priests, doctors, educated professionals, big landlords, policemen, students, and teachers, because they are assigned with a particular role and they have a social status in the society. Their way of communication is different when you are interacting with them. When people are in public, these roles are known and create expectations about how the individual concerned should behave when dealing with the others, which includes the manner of communication. Two persons in a society never meet as total strangers and suddenly start communicating. So this is a standard phenomena that we experience in our day-to-day life. And at the same time, these are the only sample of more obvious conventions. More obvious conventions. Through such conventions, something more abstract like attitudes and values are learned. What is good, what is bad, what is proper, what is improper, what is popular, what is unpopular, what is praiseworthy, what is despicable, and so on. So this is how the society and people determines one's individual ability and one's individual social status. And these status and these individual abilities are completely different that we're not able to understand. So this whole idea of this unit and this topic is try to tell us, try to tell us about the human individual, human Yeah. Yeah. Another important thing here. These aspects of culture are very powerful in their reach. Everything that happens day by day in the family, in public spaces, in school, at work, at ceremonies are governed by these well established customs relating to overt action and by these cultural values, attitudes, and beliefs. Every member of the community is expected to know these aspects of culture. Most of this learning takes place by observing and doing along with others. And in these transactions, there is very little teaching of explicitly stated rules with clear explanations using language. This process continues well beyond childhood. So, communication through means other than language is an ever present aspect of everyday interaction among members of society. And another thing in this unit is that the cultural variation, because language is depending on the culture and the cultural variations. So, most of the learning that occurs during socialization is framed and controlled by the conventions of a particular community in which the child is brought up. Conventions means the traditions, rules, and the practices, rituals, myths, language related activities, such things. There is a great variation in the specific elements of the cultures of different societies. For example, these conventions are influenced based on certain things. The first thing is that it's a geography. Geography plays a key role in language learning. And at the same time, geography also plays a key role in socialization and belonging to a particular cultural community or a cultural group. For example, if the man is from a tropical island or a desert community or else a fishing community, of those who live in a snowbound places in the middle of a large city will be vastly different. They are different from their geographical locations and the cultural background. And second important thing, there is a set of myths and beliefs, values, traditions relating to diet, clothing, arts, and crafts that are give a community a distinctive character. So this is what in our Indian context, so we can say it's a caste system. They are belonging to a caste means they're being with this certain kind of a food traditions, certain kind of dress traditions, and they have their own values, morals, beliefs, and they follow certain myths. These things will create them distinctive or different in the society. And also by practicing these systems, we can identify them. These people are coming from certain groups or certain communities. So this is what we can refer to broadly as culture. What we find in any culture are conventions that have evolved over time and are preserved by that community, not some essential and universal expression of human nature. This human nature, the word is relating to the here ability. And another one is that another important point here, human beings have certain basic needs for their physical survivals. Among them, such as food, shelter, safety, and health are among these basics. The communal arrangements that mark any human society deal with these needs of its members. There are different ways of finding and growing and preparing food, of making houses, or of preserving or curing diseases, sorry, preventing or curing diseases, and so on. So the culture and the tradition or the indigenous beliefs will decide their activities and their way of communication. And generally, in a democratic language, we can say that the communication is a universal, and the language, with the help of the language, we can communicate with everyone and we can communicate uniquely. But actually it is not like that. It depends on a geographical, it depends on a cultural practices, and also it depends on their social status. So this is how we learn the communication, we learn the language, we learn and design, we learn and design or nourish our characters, our character and characteristics. Another important point in this area is that the specific practices of a society are one indication of its culture. At the same time, a very large number of processes and activities found in any society are not necessary for physical survival, but they are an essential aspect of social life. Essential aspect of social life. These traditions and beliefs, one side, and other side, the traditions are existing to for the essentials of the living, essential aspect of social life. Like this is according to the Darwin theory, I think, and they are the forms or expressions of culture without which no social group can exist and survive. A shared language and conventions, customs relating to everyday living are obvious examples, and hundreds more can be found easily. Every society must have its own culture, both the actual expressions of culture, specific beliefs, values, and practices, and a range of material objects of particular groups or communities vary very greatly. For example, in this context, I want to give you an example of this Bonalu festival of Hyderabad. This is for everyone, for every community. They are practicing this, uh, so this is a cultural expression of the common cultural expression of the common people. For every community they are doing it. But when it comes to certain practices of this Bonalu tradition only belongs to a particular designated communities who are assigned to particular roles to perform in the society as a community profession, as a community profession, or a occupational traditions. Only those people can perform some festivals. But when it comes to the Bonalu, it's everyone's festivals. It's a group expression. It's a group expression, and it's common to everyone. And here, another important point here in this place. Science system. You have a question on the you have a question in the this unit. So what is science system? How people will communicate with the between the people with this science? Here, communication is a transaction between persons, typically two, typically or generally two people. It's a transaction between two persons, a sender and a receiver, in which something in the mind of one is conveyed to the other. So that is the communication. So conveying others is a transaction of the information. This becomes possible through a device called a sign. Device called a sign. SIGN. Certain elements in the physical world, like sounds, gestures, get closely associated with the inner mental state of individuals, ideas, and feelings taken as broad categories. Yeah, and the science, we can say that language is also a science system. In first year, you have learned that the Ferdinand de Saussure language as a science system. Uh, Here, the technical idea how the science will help us in communication or else communicating with each other. Uh, it's there. The information is like this. Uh, when two or more persons associate the same meaning with each sign in a set of signs, a sign system is available which allows communication. That means the sender activates the sign for an idea in her or his mind, and the receiver interprets the sign by matching it with the idea it is linked to, which means the original idea has now been recreated in receiver's mind. The key requirement for a sign system to work as a means of communication is that both parties attach the to same meaning to each sign. This does sound very complicated. While human communication can get very complex, the basic process is very simple. And another thing, the child might, it's talking about the child learning with the signs. Yeah. The very simple example of communication contains the essential principle of human communication, namely the association of the same meaning with a sign by the persons involved in the transactions. So that means we have a word, that word, it's a sign. So we know this sign. So two people who brought up in this in one culture or in a one language learned group, so they can understand with the already known sign. This person knows and that person knows that language words that communicate the information, then they can understand it. For example, a Telugu person cannot understand the Chinese language because he is not aware of that sign system. Sign means that language system, that written language or the spoken language. He is not aware of that. But that doesn't mean he doesn't know the meaning of it. At that context, when you communicate in Chinese language, he cannot understand it. He cannot understand it. But if he can communicate it in Telugu language, or else if he is familiar with the English, Hindi language or English language, he can easily understand it. He cannot only understand in Chinese language. So that means a person who is brought up in a community or in a language group, there only he can understand whatever is communicated. Other things he can perceive the meanings, but he cannot communicate them because he is not aware of that sign system. Here the sign is the language. Yeah. And another important point here in this unit, social settings that frame all real communicative events. So the community is the key important one in creating the language, to help the learner to learn the language. Not only the language can also come up with the behavior. Why it is behavior? In the sense, the behavior we acquire because we belongs to a certain roles, certain societal norms, certain communities, and certain occupations. So based on that, our language is also is also developed and designed according to the professions and according to the individual behavior. We need to extend this notion is more complex in modern situation in most nations, societies today, especially where urbanization has occurred. There are very few locations where a single well-knit community lives within fairly clear boundaries. The fact is that in most urban locations, there are several communities that coexist. This in the urban communities, the several communities means a group of different heterogeneous people. They are based on the language, religion, caste, place of origin or birth, and socio-economic level. These things are played and have been playing a key role in developing one's own language as well as one's own attitude and one's own individuality. But earlier, the places, the geographical locations are the traditional based geographical locations. The geographical setting is also a traditional community based geographical setting was there. When it comes to the urbanizations, the things have changed, the boundaries have changed, the language is also changed. Now it is a multilingual place when it comes to the urbanization, the apartment culture. In this apartment cultures, we are living with the different communities, different language learning people, and different place of the people, geographical location people, and at the same time, the socio-economic levels also here very important, from lower income people, higher income people, from lower social status people, higher social status people, they are living together in the urban area. So the language also changed here. Of course, they belongs to a particular group. They may brought up with a certain limited thought process, limited language skills. But when they're mingling with the urbanization process, mingling with these heterogeneous people, they need to learn, they need to acquire different kind of experiences, expressions, and they need to extend their emotional, attitudinal, and language boundaries according to their living traditions in the apartment cultures. People from these different subgroups use the same roads, buses, trains, shops, hotels, schools, hospitals, and so on. Interaction between members of this more closely integrated urban society takes place in a large number and a variety of specific social settings. One aspect of a setting is physical. These are locations or sites where certain types of transactions are typical, but other things might also happen. Some, some of the physical sites are we are accessing in the same place, but it is not the same kind of a living tradition. It is not the same kind of a communicative tradition in the rural areas, in the remote areas where the traditions are still prevailed and still playing a dominant roles. There the people cannot share the roads, people cannot share the bus stops, stations, hospitals, shops, restaurants, schools, colleges, college premises. And now these are common. When it comes to the urban areas, these are common. We can share them. We can share the classrooms. We can share the religious places, auditoriums, offices, workplaces for manual works, and everything we are doing that. And the second aspect of setting relates to a functional nature. Functional nature. Also, in this uh, functional nature, uh, where this exactly our day-to-day transactions are happening. Examples are a classroom lesson, a public lecture, panel discussion, transaction at any inquiry desk or window, consultation with the doctor, lawyer, accountant, interrogation by a police officer, reception or a farewell ceremony, or condolence meeting, anything. So these are a different one. These are different one because of this is one of the aspect of the functional related. So in this functional area, people can access everything. So there is no social boundaries. Yeah. In this unit, we have learned about the basics of the foundations of communication, especially the difference between the human communication and the animal communication. As we have spoken that animals also can communicate, especially in the context of the bees and ants. Bees can show the direction where they can get the honey from the hives, and ants can show the roots and leave some signs to the ants to get the food particles. That is their communication system. And whereas it comes to the human communication systems, one some of the communication systems in learning individually, some of them comes naturally, and some of them he has to learn them. He has to learn them. For that example, in a child case, the child is if it's a breastfeeding child, whether it is a mother's breast or if it is a bottle nipple, milk bottle nipple, he doesn't know, because when he feels hungry, he takes them and drinks the milk. So that is a natural way of the things. But when it comes to the singing a song or playing a musical instrument or driving a car, these are the acquired skills. At the same time, the learning depends on the one is the natural skill, naturally comes, and another one is that depends on the individual ability to learn the new things. So this unit is discussing two things. One is the natural skills as well as the individual abilities. That individual abilities are based on the proficiency levels, and these individual abilities should fit into the society, because the society is made up with the different sections, different assigned role peoples, communities, classes, socio-economic status, and based on that, our language system, our communication system, our behavioral pattern will be designed. So within that limits, man should explore his ability by learning new things. That is what it discussed in this unit. Yeah. Another point here in this uh, text, the unit 2, what is the language proficiency and why study it? What is language proficiency and why study it? Yeah, as I have spoken earlier, this textbook is working with, looking at two things. One is the proficiency, language proficiency levels. One is language proficiency levels, and another one is it is discussing from the learner's point of view. So in this unit, we are going to look at the notion of language proficiency and knowledge of language, vice versa, proficiency, and using language for communication, role relationships in a social context, and exploiting the structure of language to convey meanings. And another one is, what does knowing a language mean? Also, we are going to study the four channels of modalities, reading as a modality of knowing a language, basic level of proficiency and complexity in language. And another thing it is discussing in this unit, proficiency as a variable attribute, ability of individual language users and proficiency of individual language users. These things we are going to look at in this unit. And it describes the language proficiency in a operational terms, and it distinguishes between a social resource and the proficiency of individual users. As we have spoken, that language is a means of communication. People use language along with other science systems to convey meaning, express feelings, ideas, and so on. Any language among the thousands that have evolved over the centuries has a community of users. Those who know it and so can participate in transactions based on this language. They constitute the speech community of the language. Most discussions of language in general and of a particular languages take the speech community for granted and focus on features of language in general. The resources are represented mainly by the phonology, lexics, and syntax. So this means phonology means the speech sounds, and lexics means the vocabulary related to particular context and particular subject, a particular area. And another one is the syntax. Syntax means sentence structure. uh, Sentence structure. This follows the grammatical rules. And another important point it is discussing, uh, uh, the individuals have to read written texts or listen to instructions or speeches and understanding the message they contain. Communication through language is based on the intentions and actions of particular individuals, not on speech communities as a whole. Of course, for example, the Telugu language is there. The Telugu language is common for everyone, but what they are doing with the language that they knew already is depending on a individual skills. So that means that all people can do like this. No, it is not like that. All people can do good things or all people can do bad things who use this language. No, it's not like that. Whenever there are people who are using this English language, sorry, any language, it is a capacity or ability of the individual. Yes. Knowledge of language versus proficiency. So in this concept, every person in human society is associated with a base language, which is taken to be the mother tongue or home language. This is labeled as L1, language 1, L1. So the staging identities the persons as belonging to a particular linguistic group. And this is a very familiar process in India, since each one of us is often identified as a Telugu person, Bengali person, Gujarati person, Malayali person, or Tamilian. So this is based on the linguistic group. It is based on the linguistics group. The label also carries with its implications that the person knows that language. If we call him is a Bengali, that means he knows the Bengali. So based on his linguistic group, we address them. And we know of persons who do not know and use their formal mother tongue, probably because they were brought up in another part of the country and went to English medium schools. At a more general level, children of people who migrate to other countries often lose their knowledge of their mother tongue. Someone, if we call him as he's a Bengali person, but the Bengali is brought up in Hyderabad, he knows only Telugu language. but he forgot or else he lose the contact or idiomatic expression with his mother tongue. So it happens when the people are migrating to the other places. So this is the idea of knowledge of language versus proficiency. And proficiency in multilingual societies. So if we take the same example, like a Bengali person who is brought up born in Bengal but brought up in Hyderabad, and he lost touch with his Bengali language, is in a very proficiency level. He knows the language, but he is not that much fluent in his expression. So he is good at in Telugu language, but actually we coin him as a Bengali person, not as a Telugu person, though he speaks very good Telugu language. So in this context, the people are the multilingual, we can call them as a multilingual people, because they're brought up in the multilingual societies. There they adapt to different languages, and for their communication purpose, and for their basic needs also. They use these words, and they learn these words. For example, even if we don't know anything about the Malayalam language, if we travel in Kerala for 1 week or 10 days time on a vacation, that time automatically we learn something. Okay, we ask water everywhere, but some people don't know what is water, but they have a water bottle or something like that. Suddenly they will tell something else, this is vellam. So we learn that kind of vocabulary also. Also, vellam means water, like that. For example, if we need a bottle, they may call it as uppi. In the Kerala, they may call it for the bottle, the meaning is uppi. Okay, will the next day or third day onwards, we also start speaking in that word. Whenever we go to the shopping, we ask, oh no, I need a uppi vellam, means water bottle. Like that, we call and address them. So this is how we learn the multilingual capabilities. We develop multilingual capabilities when we are slowly acclimatized with that cultures, when we are in the basic need to communicate in that language. So that necessity always force me to learn the language. We may not be part of that culture, we may not be part of that cultural expressions, but when we are in that particular circumstances or the context, we learn the basic things of that language and will practice them. And another thing is that here is using language for communication. Yeah, these things we discussed, because these things also available in the first unit. I have read a lot of things. The role relationships in a socio-cultural context. I told you that roles, for example, the role is assigned to a police officer, the role is assigned to a woman, the role is assigned to a priest or a doctor, how they will behave and how to communicate with them. Sometimes there are some caste professions and occupations are there, and this will give a language limitations. And when we are interacting with the society, when we are communicating with the other community people, that time this teaches us how to communicate with the other people who are in the upper class position, or else in the social hierarchy they are in the top place, and how to be, how to talk to them, how to use the language, how to use the language with them. So these things we have learned in the first units, and this is also discussing the same thing here. And another thing here, we should know the purpose, message, and value. Purpose of the message, and the message we conveying, and the value of the message. Whenever there is a communication means there is a message, and the sentences make up the message are linked to the purpose. Why we talk? For a particular purpose, we talk. And this is underlying the transactions. The important point here is that the purpose comes first in a given context. The language has its own meaning and value only in the context. If doesn't carry any meaning in the out of context. And another name for purpose in this sense is a function. So that means language is always a functionary. Examples of such functions are given: give information, make a request, express disagreement, give directions, etc. These functions are not based on the particular subject or topic featuring in the sentences. but or rather social acts linking the sender and receiver. It's a general way of the communications. Messages are considered to be made up of utterances. The way we speech is called as an utterance. Utter means we are pronouncing that, we are speaking out utterances. These may be the sentences, but sometimes may be only phrases. Sometimes maybe only phrases. The sentences which is an utterance has a meaning in the context of a given message that goes beyond its plain sense of significance. So this is called value. So you may get a question, so for example, a short question like what is purpose, what is message, and what is value. So this is available on the page number 16 of the second unit. A purpose, message, and value. To put it very simply, when a message is produced to serve a purpose, it is built up of utterances rather than sentences. Of course, sentences in the conventional sense are there in a message, but it is the local contextual meaning as utterances that constitutes the message. The process of communication described above is most readily seen in relation to the setting of direct face-to-face interaction between two persons, since the aspects of setting and roles are more obvious there. And another point is that the exploiting the structure of language to convey meaning. Here in this title, it tells us using English means exploiting the resources of this language to convey meaning. The expression follow the rules of English is commonly used, but it's commonly used, but it is better to think of language as providing a set of resources. The system of rules pertaining to English language constitutes its structure. This means the grammar and sentence structure, the subject, verb, predicate, and the parts of speeches, the sentence structures, interrogative, assertive, negative, that type of sentences. Uh, the structural elements like the grammar, vocabulary, phonology, and script are essentially the means that this language provides for expressing meaning. So that is why it helps to treat them as a resource base or a toolkit that can be drawn upon is needed for persons to communicate with one another. And another important examination point of view, another important concept is that what does the meaning of knowing a language means? What does meaning of knowing a language means? Here, the knowing language means uh, uh, here in a practical sense, in everyday, practical in everyday sense, knowing a language means being able to use it in a simple terms. You know the language means someone knows English means he is able to use it. If someone knows Hindi means he is able to use it, whether it is a spoken form or written form, he is able to use it. When a person claims that he or she knows English, what is the sort of evidence would want it? It stems logical to expect this person to read and listen to texts in this language with understanding. With understanding. So how you are using it is one thing, and another thing is that whether you are able to understand it or not, and another thing, whether it is a speech or the writing. This informal description of ability to use language has brought to light an important aspect of language in use. It is that four channels or modalities are involved. Four channels or modalities are involved, as I have spoken earlier. These four channels are the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So these are the four important skills or modalities or channels of the language. If a language is being used to communicate at all, it must be through one of these four channels. Otherwise, there is no meaning of the language. The expression of languaging does not have any practical meaning in everyday terms. And the four channels or modalities here are the LSRW skills. Each of these made up of a number of component sub-skills. For example, as an individual does not learn all of them together or in the same manner. It is possible that the spoken language skills, listening and speaking, are developed much more than those related to the written form, or vice versa. Another type of separation is also possible, that is the receptive skills, listening and reading. Language skills, listening and the speaking, spoken language skills, and the receptive skills, listening and reading, might develop to a greater degree than the productive skills of speaking or writing. And another one is the reading as a modality of knowing a language. Here, a reader has to understand the message contained in a given written text. When someone is looking at a page of written material in a newspaper, a book, a handwritten letter, etc., and moving her or his eyes across the lines, we assume that the reading is occurring. But surely it is not this visible activity that we refer to by using the term reading. What is important is that the reader makes sense of or comprehends the information in the text. The writers of the text wanted to convey some message to the reader, and the reader should be able to get this meaning from the text. If he or she is successful in reading or is able to read. And here, another two important concepts are there: basic level of proficiency and complexity in language. These things we'll discuss in tomorrow's session.